here we are. So, as usual, this is a conversation about rest and how rest plays into the creative process, and specifically the creative process for art workers. And today's subject is imagination. But before we get to it, I just want to kind of recap what we talked about last time and give space for if anyone had any reflections or anything they wanted to share. And if that happened already, just let me know. But last time we talked about types of rest. And we realized that there's a lot of different types of rest. So a lot of times people think of rest as sleep, and it's actually a lot more complex than that. So we talked about physical rest, which does include sleep as well as like all types of resting your body, really. So that could even be like going to a spa or getting a massage. Mental rest, which is rest of the mental state. Sensory rest, giving yourself a break from multiple, if not all, senses. And then emotional rest from thinking about our emotions, dealing with our emotions. Also rest from things that heighten our emotional response. Social rest, which just as it sounds, a rest from being social, or sometimes it can be a rest from certain types of social interaction, whether that be, having time with just you and your best friend rather than going out to a larger social engagement, etc. And then creative rest, where you're allowing yourself to create without really having any intention or desired goal. It's kind of creating for the process, not for the outcome. And then spiritual rest. So things like meditation, prayer, things that help your spirit to find more ease. So those were our 7 types of rest that we discussed last time, and we worked through a few of those. I guess if there's anything that anyone is, that anyone has thought about since our last meeting about those types of rest, I'll encourage you to put them in the chat, and we can return to that later if you have anything. But yeah, so after breaking rest down, we talked a little bit about imagining, and within these types of rest, one of the things we talked about was daydreaming and kind of letting our minds move on their own and not necessarily be focusing on a specific, kind of like I said with the creative rest, a specific outcome, but just like allowing our minds to wander. And that is kind of our bridge into today's discussion of imagination. So first, I just wanted to share this quote that I think is really, I think, a beautiful way of thinking about imagination, a portal through which you can transcend the imposed limitations of this world. With wisdom and will, whatever you can imagine and continue to imagine can become real. And so a lot of the philosophy that I think I pull from is from the yoga and yogic tradition. And so this is a yoga swami, Yogananda, who was basically explaining his understanding of imagination and the use of imagination. I thought that was really, really very potent of a description of imagination in comparison to like what you see in the dictionary or like kind of more plain explanations of what imagination is. And it's because of this idea of imagination being a portal through which we can transcend. I think that first part is really important because we are always kind of given, right, our limitations, or our kind of beliefs are created from what we see in society and what other people experience and tell us. And so through imagination, you're kind of challenged per se to go outside of those bounds. And as we talk about imagination a little bit more, you'll see how actually it's a mix of going outside of those bounds and also using some of those bounds as our starting point or as our jumping point. But before we get into discussing imagination any further or really diving into the relationship between imagination and sleep, I wanted to give us a chance to do a kind of experiential thinking about meditation and about imagination. So we're going to do a little meditation to start. And whenever I start a meditation, I do a little bit of movement or kind of getting our bodies ready for stillness. And so I'm going to stop my share for just a second so we can do that. And then we'll go into a short meditation that I think will prepare our minds and bodies for this exploration of imagination. So I'll give a few moments here for everyone to just kind of get comfortable in your seat. You can have both of your feet firmly on the ground if you're in a chair. If you are in some other position, just making sure that you're grounded and feeling stable. Again, if you're in a chair, you can actually, in any seat, you can go ahead and relax your arms onto your lap. Maybe your hands are down, palms facing your legs. Or maybe if you're trying to call in a little bit more energy, maybe your palms are up for a second. We're just going to start by closing the eyes and breathing. First, noticing the rhythm of your own breath. Noticing the temperature of your breath as it goes into your nostrils and the temperature of your breath as it goes out. Noticing the length of your inhale and the length of your exhale. Noticing the quality of your breath, whether it feels smooth and continuous or whether it feels a little bit choppy or irregular. And then from here, begin to deepen the breath, pulling the breath all the way down towards the navel, filling up all of the lungs. And then exhaling through the nose, letting it all back out, slow and steady. Take 2 more deep breaths like this. Big inhale, filling the whole chest, the whole belly. And then exhaling through the nose, slow and steady, letting that air out. Last time, maybe this breath being as full as you can go. When you think that you've breathed in all that you can, maybe take 1 more sip in of air. And then exhale, let it all out, slow and steady. Good. You can return to a natural pattern of breathing, maybe still deepening it from what you observed earlier today before we began our deep breaths. Good. Then you can place your hands on your knees and just start to round your shoulders, inhaling the shoulders up towards your ears and exhaling them back and down. Inhaling up and exhaling down. We'll continue this for about 5 breaths. If there's any other little movements that feel good to you, maybe doing 1 shoulder at a time, maybe moving your head around a little bit as you round your shoulders, maybe shaking the shoulders out a little bit. Shaking is a really great way to access kind of stress relief or release of tension. Take one more shrug up to the ears. Exhale back and down. You can come to stillness again, inhaling in a neutral position and then exhaling, letting the head fall to one side and making any little movements on this side that feel good. So maybe it feels good to just stay still, or maybe you want to kind of rock the head forward and back, turn the head side to side. Kind of noticing the sensations of your body and making a read on what it is asking for. Movement is our way to have a conversation with our body. And then inhale, bring the head back up to the center, and then exhale, we'll do it on the other side. So continuing to breathe here as you roll the head in whichever direction feels good for you. Allowing this movement to be more intuitive than it is focused on exactly what I'm saying. So maybe there's some other movement that I haven't even thought of that feels really good in your body and stretches that part of your neck or shoulders that needs to be stretched. And then when you're ready, bring the head back up on an inhale. Let the breath out. And then inhale, reach the arms up. And you can interlace the fingers above your head. Press the palms up and just kind of sway side to side. Again, listening to your own body, figuring out what you need. Maybe it's bringing the arms forward. Maybe it's bringing the arms back. Maybe it's focusing on the breath as you do so. And when you're ready, bring the arms back down to your lap. Good. Making any other motion that feels important to you before we come back into stillness and do a little bit of meditation work. So if twisting feels really good for your spine, if you need to do anything with your face, maybe tightening up your face and then relaxing if you feel really tense in your face, anything that feels good. And then when you're ready, we're going to just sit back in our seats. Let our arms come down to our laps. And bring our awareness to our breath. And this time we'll also bring our awareness to our senses. So noticing your surroundings and your experience of this moment through each of your senses. So noticing what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can hear, what you can taste in your mouth even. And we have our eyes closed so we won't think about what we can see right now. But in closing our eyes, we kind of open this room or turn the lights on, right, of this inner seeing. And that's what we're going to use during this meditation. So as you breathe, take a moment to just notice how you feel in your body overall. This time, bringing your senses a little bit closer, noticing our internal feelings as far as our physical body. How do your muscles feel? How do your limbs feel? How does your digestive system and your torso feel? How does your breath feel in your body? How does your head feel? Then noticing how you feel on a mental level. Notice where your mind is going as we have these practices of turning inward. When we have these moments of silence in between interactions or in between directions, notice where your mind is going. Is it staying present in this experience of right now? Is it traveling to the past, maybe thinking about things that happened earlier today or news that we got earlier that we're still processing, or conversations that we've had, things that we've read in the news? Or maybe you might find that some of your thoughts are drifting into the future, thinking about things you anticipate happening later today or later this week. This includes anything that we're preparing for, right? So if you're still thinking about that project that you're working on that you need to finish by Thursday or whatever it may be, see if you can let any thoughts of the past or future go and just focus your energy on the present moment. Allowing your breath and your senses to ground you back into that present moment whenever you feel like you've drifted off into thought. Each inhale, bringing in all of the details of this present moment, and each exhale, allowing you to rest in it. And from here, I want you to think about any thoughts that have come up during this meditation, whether they were present or past. Future or past, we've already discussed. I also want you to think about how much of it is real and tangible in this moment. So kind of assessing those things, whether it was something that happened in the past, something that happened in the future. Kind of questioning its reality. And then I want you to finish up that thought process. And then think about any moments of this meditation so far that you felt very present. And think about what was real in that, what was tangible. So whether or not that was your senses, your breath, what you can actually reach out and touch. Good. We can discuss further afterwards, but typically what you'll find with that exercise is that the present moment is the only place where there's anything really tangible to you, right? Those things that happened in the past happen then, and we can't go back and finish that or change that conversation or change what happened. And those things in the future, we can't really touch yet. We can't really access yet because they're not right now, they're in the future. And so within yoga, there is kind of an assessment of this phenomenon of the only thing that is really real, that is tangible, that we have any control over being the present moment. And everything else is sort of our imagination, right? We're either thinking back and thinking about things that happened in the past and kind of imagining around them. So maybe it's that we wish we had responded differently to this thing, or we don't know how to process this thing, so we're thinking about it and we're kind of picking it apart. Or we're imagining the future and we're either worrying or preparing ourselves in some way for something that we haven't yet touched, that we don't even a lot of times know for sure is going to happen, right? So in that sense, we're kind of using our imagination all the time. And I think I just want us to sit in that idea and pick it apart a little bit for yourself about how much time we spend imagining and what that imagination kind of moves towards. So does it move towards the past or the future more? Does it move towards kind of how we can improve things, or does it more so move towards like the ideas of worry or anxiety? And in different times in our lives, there's a little bit of a different experience of this. But just assess that for yourself without judgment, without kind of analyzing yourself and your psyche too much, just noticing kind of what your patterns are. Then making peace with those patterns, reminding yourself that you are wonderful and beautiful just as you are in this moment. And then returning your awareness to your breath, deepening the breath, exhaling completely. Again, noticing how each breath feels inside of your body, how the rest of your body moves to accommodate the inhalation of the breath, and then moves to accommodate the exhalation of the breath. And when you're ready, start to blink your eyes open, maybe wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes. Good. And we're back. All right, so I like that exercise because it gives us a moment to really experience for ourselves the idea that the only thing that is real is what we can perceive in our present moment, and that everything else is kind of a bit of our imagination, right? Which I know is like an existential way of thinking of it. But it gives us this idea that we are actually imagining all the time. And so we will go into what that means. I'm going to share my screen.
Gigi, you're muted. Unmute. There you are.
Okay, I'm back. It says that The sound goes out when you share your screen and you have to
I know
read
you were
it
trying to
back.
stop. It's just a
Okay. So what I was saying was
wait, Gigi,
that
can you hear
presence
me?
is our time, is kind of the idea of being present is not creating any stories around our existence, and it's just taking in what is in front of you, which is kind of the function of meditation. And so when folks are struggling with meditation, really it's actually an overactive imagination. But what we realize in that is that the idea of not using our imagination is challenging, but it's also about how we use our imagination. And we'll return to that in a moment. But the other thing I wanted to pinpoint here is that we're really creating our own reality with our imagination. And that's kind of the way in which we are using our imagination regularly. And there are a number of different ways that can look. So there are more balanced ways of using your imagination to create your reality, which look more so like setting goals, intentions, envisioning the future. And then there's also more unbalanced ways, that look more like fear, anxiety, thinking about, well, what's going to happen, or, this happened and therefore I think this is going to happen, but it actually hasn't happened yet. And then there are more neutral ways that don't have as much of an intense emotional connection, which might just be, watching strangers in the park and, imagining what their life stories might be or something like that. Which actually I feel like is a really fun exercise for using your imagination. So what does this have to do with rest? So once we have an idea of kind of what our imagination is doing, our relationship with imagination, how often we are imagining, the question here is, what is the importance of rest to our imagination? How does that affect how we imagine? And the answer is really that rest gives us the opportunity to slow things down and be able to imagine in a more balanced way. So we have those imbalances that we were talking about, like worry, anxiety, fear, all of those things that kind of are what I would consider a misuse of our imagination. And so dreaming, as you can see here, is almost like imagination practice. And so while I'm going to talk about rest in general, and then I'm going to talk about sleep. Before we get to sleep, rest in general gives us this opportunity to either, in the context of meditation, really relax ourselves away from imagination and be more mindful about how we approach our imagination. So whether that is how we think about the past or how we think about the future, when we are in a present state of mind, it gives us a rest from either one. And therefore we can reset ourselves and go after these kind of more almost inevitable ways that we use our imagination, like thinking of the future, planning what we're going to do for the day, whatever it may be, in a more restful and more easeful way, because we are able to create some space between us and those things. We don't feel as attached to them because we've taken this time away from it. There's also the idea of rest being a time to kind of almost like how people say sometimes that, like, when I was a kid, we were bored, so we were creative, we would like make things. Whereas now, like, kids have like screens and lots of stimulation, and they're not forced to like make a game out of whatever, or, things that I feel like was part of my childhood that is not as prevalent now. And that is another way that imagination is kind of fueled by rest, is this space, this time where we're not being fed anything, where we have to kind of create stimulation. It makes way for a kind of brighter or more intense experience of imagination. But sleep specifically has a really important relationship with imagination, and Specifically, it's deep sleep. So when you're sleeping, you have non-REM and REM sleep. So non-REM is the first part of your sleep. You enter that first. And non-REM is really preparing your body for REM, which is REM stands for rapid eye movement, if you're not familiar. And so during the preparation phase, your body is slowing down. So your heart rate is slowing down, your breath is slowing down. Excuse me. And kind of everything is going into like what you would think of as sleep. The brain waves in your head are slowing down, and kind of there's less brain activity. And it all prepares us for this REM sleep, which is where dreams happen. So there's no dreaming that happens in non-REM sleep. The only dreaming that happens is in REM sleep. And so once you enter REM sleep, you actually brain activity increases a little bit, and we start this processing and evaluating. And a lot of this is based on what we have going on in our lives. And that can be based on a number of things. It can be whatever is at the kind of top of our attention that day. So whether that's something that we were just thinking about right before we went to sleep, or if that is something that that has an intense emotion related to it. So if it's something that we're really worried about, or that really impacts our lives, or that there's a visceral reaction to, that can be another way that something enters our evaluation or processing field of REM sleep. And then lastly, I think it's kind of interesting that literally when we say to sleep on something, like it literally gives your body time to fully process whatever the decision that you're trying to make, or the project that you're working on. It seems like almost you're taking a break from working on it, but sleeping actually is a function of evaluating and processing things that have happened, things that you've been thinking about. And it does so through this almost like imaginative process of taking what we have seen, or the experiences and things that we have interacted with during the day, and then almost like rearranging them in creative ways to find solutions. We're going to get back to a little bit of that idea of finding solutions, but I want to just pinpoint that REM sleep is actually the most primary time that we're doing this. So all rest kind of contributes to our ability to imagine. But there was actually a study done where one group was just resting, one group was allowed to enter non-REM sleep, but not REM sleep, which there's like a timing thing with that. So after about an hour, they would be woken up before they would get into REM sleep, which is like the last third of your sleeping. And then, or it's a cycle, it's like a 90-minute cycle. So before you get to the REM sleep, they would wake you up. And then the last one would be people would be able to sleep for a full 90-hour sleep cycle and experience non-REM and REM sleep. And what they found in that was that people that were experiencing REM sleep specifically were able to excel more on like creativity quizzes or evaluations, that they were feeling more like they had processed emotions and things like that. So there are a lot of benefits specifically to the addition of REM sleep that were not there for the resting and non-REM. So this is actually an example of where like full sleep and deep sleep specifically is really necessary for our bodies. Good. Okay, and so as I was talking about, as far as the idea of our sleep cycle being a place of us being able to process through things, this is an example of another study. In 1993, Harvard Medical School did a research study where participants were instructed to ask themselves a question right before bed. And they would do this each day for a week. and write down like any experiences that were related, right? So what they would dream about, if they kind of had moved on throughout that that like process of answering the question, and maybe even possible solutions that might have come up for them after sleeping. And then at the end of the week, they found that over half of the participants dreamt about the issue, and about a quarter of them found a solution during their dream cycle, which I think is very interesting. So I'm kind of giving the invitation for us to all try this over the next week, or during some week until the next time that we meet on our third Tuesday, and see if you have any, I guess, things that are resolved for you during that time. And they didn't give examples of what kind of questions folks were asking themselves. And so I think that that would be a fun consideration as well. Like, I'm definitely going to try this for a couple different questions that are different types of questions, I would say, and see definitely like if I find any type of solutions through that process of asking myself right before I go to sleep every night. This is a great example of like bringing something to the front of your attention before going to sleep. So even though this can happen kind of, unconsciously, there's also the ability to do this consciously, which makes it a very valuable tool. So I'm curious if that will, create any openings of imagination. And so this idea of our dreams being an opportunity to process emotions is not only something that we can notice happening without our intention placed on it, right? Which I think is very common. Like for me, I think a lot of the dreams that I remember, which I actually don't remember a lot of my dreams, but when I do remember dreams, typically it's about something that, or I'm able to draw it back to something that I'm like anxious about, or very very emotional about in some way. And so in doing this experiment of having it be something that I actually want to be working through, or that that is more like pleasant to work through, something that I am planning for the future, or something that I am kind of considering or exploring in a creative way, gives you the opportunity to switch from that like more imbalanced imagination or relationship with your imagination, or into a more balanced and more kind of positive, useful use of your imagination. So I think this is interesting because within yoga, it's known, or within life actually, breath is something that happens without your control, like very subconsciously, because your body will, if you stop consciously breathing, your body will step in and make you breathe, which is awesome, right? It keeps us alive. And so, but then there's also this idea that when you are able to have control over your breath, the breath is so powerful on its own. When you bring intention into that power, you actually create space for really intense healing. And so I wonder, and kind of see the connections between that and this idea of imagining in a healthier, more intentional way. So I'm going to stop there. I think we're right at 3 minutes, actually. I just want to give a space. Okay, so why am I using a CPAP machine to get my breathing during? So that's actually because of, I'm assuming a condition where our body stops breathing during the night for small periods of time. So this can be everything from, and I was just reading about this, actually. I'm reading a book called The Science of Breath. And it's, the body kind of stops breathing, but only for like a slight moment. But the thing is, during that time, we're not having our body get oxygenated. And so this can be a result of different things that that affect our breath, which in reading this book, I've realized that like almost everything affects our breath. But I believe, and I'm trying to remember the exact details, but I believe it has something to do with your heart, or the ability to turn oxygen into, or like kind of glean oxygen from your breath regularly. And so it creates like kind of almost like gaps or lags.
Yeah, that's for people that, have sleep studies, but let me see. Maybe we'll use your phone as a way so that we can have a conversation and you can hear me. So this is a really good conversation to have, especially when we're thinking about imagination and, our future present and how we imagine that being present in our sleep, so I'm really thinking about this. And I did post a question about all these sleep studies that are going on.
We have somebody who couldn't. We also have somebody. I don't think I muted her.
Okay, but, so I did too. So I'll tell her to unmute.
Yeah, I was gonna put something.
Okay.
If you
I think I'm back. Let me stop sharing.
Can you hear us? Can you hear us? Okay. Or she can't even hear us, right?
No, not at all. I called her so that I know I called her.
Oh, you did? Okay. Yeah.
I'm going to call her back.
Yeah. Ask her some questions so she can answer them so we can edit.
I'm going to call you back. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
All right. So
I missed the end of what you were saying, and I wonder if you can repeat. I'm going to mute myself while you're talking though.
So what we're going to do is use my cell phone as your speaker so that you can hear the question, because we're having some tech difficulty. And I really appreciate this presentation and your conversation on imagination and sleep. But what kind of jarred me is the end of the presentation when you're saying that sometimes, and I know that, if you're laying next to somebody and you hear them breathing and then there's no sound, right? And then, or like you said, momentarily, sometimes we do stop breathing, right? And so I've done some sleep studies, etc., and that's why I posed that question in the chat. So if my body automatically kicks back in and wakes me up, or, we just have these mechanisms in our system that when we're in deep sleep or beyond REM sleep, that are, like I said, our bodies, and I'd like to get that study if you could put the link to it in the chat so I can kind of research a little more, because I've been told I stopped breathing maybe 99.9% within an hour during the sleep study, but oftentimes I'm just not like, my body reacts and responds and it wakes itself up, when I'm in a deep sleep like that. So, but it's good information to continue to have. And then the other question, I guess, that I'm going to pose is when you talked about imagination, and sometimes we can put thoughts in our head and then our bodies I guess when we're in that dream state, we dream about them. You don't record your dreams at all. I used to record my dreams because they would be so vivid. And I maybe me as a like a visual artist, I recollect and remember the dreams, and sometimes they linger on, or sometimes I want them to be a soap opera, so like, what am I gonna dream about tonight? And so I do play in dreams, and and vision through dreams. But again, like you said, that's more of our imagination when we play with our dreams. Do you ever think about that? You're on mute. I'm gonna ask you to unmute. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, here we are. All right. And I don't know if I'll turn the volume down on you on my phone, so that way we're not overdoing it. But yeah, so first, so the article that I had that talked about the Harvard study was actually more so about our ability to influence our dreams more so than the sleep apnea. But I do, if I can find it, I can show you the one of the studies that they referred to in the book that I was reading. I'm wondering though, this is a somewhat old book though, so I wonder if there's anything newer, but the more I can find about it, the more I can like send to you. But the main cause for, and what I don't want to tell you what you were experiencing, but it sounds like sleep apnea. Is that what they have called it for you?
That's my diagnosis, yes. So, but 5 years later, or something like 5 years in, but just because you brought it up and you were, saying to us how our bodies have.
I lost you on the phone.
I'll call you back, but there was echoing going on. Hello.
Oh, look.
I don't know why it keeps dropping. Catherine. Sorry about that.
Okay, so this is technical. This is how you deal with technical issues with Zooming. I've done this before when I couldn't hear somebody. So we just go ahead on and talk on the phone as we zoom along. But anyway, I just kind of like looked at the conversation that we were having and how you kind of just the tip of the iceberg in terms of how you were saying our bodies respond in our sleep, you know what I mean? To if we stop breathing for that millisecond, our bodies have a way of making sure that we're getting air. And then you commented that it's something to do with our heart as well.
Yeah. So the most common, at least, situation is actually like the narrowing of airways. And so, but that could also be the narrowing of airways or of like the movement of blood, so our circulatory system. And so that can come from so many different things. It can be changes in your hormonal levels. It can be different things like obesity or like lack of, like, not enough water in your system. So not like dehydration. There's honestly a lot of different ways. And then there's also studies that have shown that you can have like not very many of the things that they say cause sleep apnea and still experience sleep apnea. So it's actually a little bit of a mystery even to doctors today. There's like things that you can do to lessen your chances, but it can also be from almost like bad breathing habits, if that makes sense. So there are sometimes where because of different emotional states, so your emotions are first off, I want to like give a little bit of background. So your emotions are really tightly connected to your breathing, which you can kind of see when, like, you're really angry, you breathe kind of like fast and almost like irregular. And then when you're super calm, you start to deepen your breath a little bit, like naturally. When you are shocked, you might gasp and do that thing where you kind of are pulling in your belly and pulling in air, which is they actually call it like not opposite breathing, but like, what is it called? Like oxymoronic breathing or something like that, where it's like the idea is typically your belly would go out as you breathe in, but in this case, your belly is going in. And so all of those things, like being in those different emotional states sometimes can like create habits or patterns within you that contribute to sleep apnea. So yeah, it's actually like a little bit mysterious, but also there's like a lot of different things that could contribute to it. And it's really common, unfortunately. But usually the situation is that your body at some point will kick in and say like, oh, hold on, you're not breathing, and make you breathe. Usually that function is only necessary when you are changing from consciously breathing or like thinking about your breathing and not, or when something happens where you are stopping yourself from breathing. And then, so if you were to like hold your breath for a really long time, eventually your body would kick in and be like, nope, we got to breathe, and it would force you to breathe. And so in this case, typically it's like not a huge effect on your health because your body will kick in. The idea of the CPAC is that it trains your body to kick in quicker so that you don't get to the point where you're like not breathing for 5 minutes at night, which is like, I think, towards the more severe end of sleep apnea is like actually not breathing for like minutes at a time.
So maybe I'll piggyback that question with, I understand that there's a worldwide shortage of CPAP machines, right?
Wow.
Due to COVID, I mean, that's a major health crisis. So many people are needing this kind of equipment, and it's a shortage of it, worldwide, which is very disconcerting, and then how does that, when you're rest deprived because of these conditions, what do you think that we can do? Because I'm like you saying, put a thought in your head, or what you can imagine before you go to sleep, or, what kind of exercises, you as a, therapist, are you, can make that recommendation for us, or just a suggestion if you don't really want to do a clinical recommendation.
Yeah. I appreciate that because I don't want anyone to try something and it doesn't work and come back to me like, you said this would cure my... But what I would say is that at least through my understanding of yoga is that a part of pranayama, which is breath control and the practice of breath control, doing it regularly, is that it's training our body to access these benefits of like almost perfect breathing. And so it gives us almost like, what's a good example? Almost like when you're learning a language and you might repeat something to yourself over and over again. And then it's like when you see the situation where you need to use that phrase or when you need to use that word, because you have thought about it so much, it comes back to your memory in comparison to something that maybe you learned what this word means, but then you haven't used it in 3 years, so you forget what it means. It's kind of the same in your breathing. Is if you are consciously working with your breath on a regular basis, it trains your body to breathe fuller, to kind of deal with some of those inconsistencies. So whether that is your airways being inflamed at times, like it helps your body to be in a healthier condition. So like I said, sleep apnea usually is like a constriction of your airways somewhere. Not always, but that's usually the case. And there are breath exercises that help you to like kind of almost like stretch and exercise those airways and those pieces of your respiratory system. And so one example of this that's really good. Yeah, okay. I was going to say, I can give you one example that I think is like the most basic and the most, honestly, it's like the most efficient way to breathe in general. So it helps you to kind of move the circulatory system forward, is 3-part breathing. And so this comes from the idea, or not the idea, but the truth that there are parts of, so the idea of our breathing is that we pull in air, it has oxygen. The oxygen goes through our lungs and through like the different, like, what is it called? Like ALE, there's like the smaller part after bronchi, there's like these other things. It's like alveoles or something like that. It sounds like an Italian word, but it's not. But it, on a cellular level, is connecting that oxygen with your blood. And so when you are breathing just in your chest and you're not breathing all the way down to like your navel and letting your belly puff out like that, what's happening is that your breath is only going so low in your lungs, and it's not reaching, because some of that blood is impacted by gravity. It's not, if you are sitting up, it's not actually accessing all of the blood. So the idea of 3-part breathing is that you're breathing with all 3 parts of your lungs. So there's the thoracic breathing, so to speak, which is chest breathing. And then there's diaphragmatic breathing, which is all the way down in the bottom of your lungs. And then there's I want to say it's clavicle breathing, which is almost like that idea of you have a very full breath already in, and you try to take like one more sip of breath, and it kind of almost like stretches your collarbone in a way. Those are the 3 different parts. So with 3-part breathing, you're inhaling in that order. So it seems a little bit weird because you're starting in the middle, going down, and then going back up, but that's kind of actually how it works in your body. So you take an inhale in, you fill up your chest, and then you let your belly come out, which is not actually your breath going all the way into your belly, but it's the diaphragm, which is the muscle that sits right under your lungs. It usually is kind of, it's kind of shaped like this usually. And so when you take a deep breath in, your lungs press down on it, and it presses like that. And then all of the contents of your belly, so all of your organs and, your stomach, your liver, all the different things that are down there, some of them were like in this little hole right here, but you've pressed down, so then they come out, and that's what makes your belly move out. And so you are pushing down on the diaphragm, which is why that bottom part of your breath is called your diaphragmatic breathing. So you would inhale, pull it into your chest, have your belly come out really big. And then again, like take that last little bit of breath that almost feels like it's stretching around your collarbones. And those are all 3 parts of the breath. And then you would exhale slowly, kind of letting each one of those release in the opposite order of when they came in. So I won't take us through that, but you can just practice that on your own, these big, deep breaths.
I think that goes back into in remembering to do that and be mindful to do that even in our waking time, because I know I hear myself sometimes go, and let out air that I didn't know I was holding in, because I'm in the midst of thinking and working and doing whatever I'm doing. And then how do people forget to exhale, because you're holding the air in, and then letting it out, you know what I mean? But I'm really appreciative of you reminding me to make sure that it's a mental remembrance that you have to breathe, because then it alleviates what your stress, number one, your headache, if you're not getting that oxygen in and out, on and on, you know what I mean? And it goes back to our topic of the art of rest, because it is an art, that we take for granted. And we just take it for granted that it's breathing is a natural thing that we just take for granted, especially when you're grasping for air. And another thing that a lot of doctors are saying, well, they're prescribing sleep aids because people can't rest. They don't get enough sleep. Their sleep is a disturbed sleep. But I know some doctors frown on taking sleep aids at night. What's your thought about
that? So I am a believer that you should, or not that you should, but I think that medicine like that is, I feel like there are some people who are like, you should not use them. I kind of feel like if you're in a situation where you're in dire need of sleep and that's the only thing that's working for you, I think that you should use it. I think my general opinion on that, which I haven't really thought about much, so I'm kind of like processing as I'm answering, but sleep is really difficult for us to access lately. Like the more stimulus that we are interacting with, the more, or stimuli that we're interacting with, the more it becomes really difficult to fully rest your body. And I think even in a session, either last month or the one before that, we were talking about how like there's a lot of people who are sleeping, but they're not quite at rest because they're not able to get their body to that non-REM sleep that prepares us for REM sleep, or the deep sleep is not as effective because we're having such a hard time getting our bodies to actually relax. And so one way that within yoga we use to help that is different relaxation practices that you can do right before you go to bed. So you're relaxing your body in a way before you even get to that REM sleep. It's almost like, that non-REM sleep. It's almost like preparing yourself for the preparation, or like doing a little, overtime, I guess, on relaxation so that you can really find a more restful sleep. And that's been shown to make really, really big differences for some people. And I've even experienced in my own life, because I sometimes still deal with pretty bad anxiety. And that was part of my issue, is I could never get myself, I would have a hard time falling asleep and I would have a hard time staying asleep. And that idea of like fully resting my body and learning how to consciously rest my body before I get to the point of sleep has really improved my sleep on those nights where I'm not able to fall asleep. A lot of times going through something like a body scan, which is just moving through your body and kind of bringing your awareness to each part of your body, and trying to like bring a relaxation to each part of your body. So it's like relax your toes, relax your feet, relax your ankles, etc. Also, the process of yoga nidra, which is yogic sleep, is the good one, which actually part of that process is a body scan like that, or a circulation, what is it called? A circulation of awareness, or some term like that, but it's similar to a body scan where you're going around and moving your awareness through your body. And so those two practices, I think, are really good, very accessible ways. Like you don't have to be able to have a doctor that will give you sleep medicine to access that and to be able to affect your sleep on some a degree. But then there's also, I think, situations that are more dire than that. And we're dealing with a lot of stress in our everyday life. I mean, we have access to more information than we ever have before. There's all kinds of questions about ethics of that information, and the ethics of like AI using that information to create new things, and like there's so much to think about that I think that's why these practices are so necessary at the moment. And it's even a lot of why I started going into business and wanting to commit my time to helping people relax or helping people process through things, is because there's such a huge need for it right now. And it doesn't surprise me, some of the statistics that you're saying about the CPAC machines being like, and I think I did hear that, but I forgot about it. But the shortage of them because of COVID, and COVID is a respiratory condition. And so it has an effect on your lungs, it has an effect on your airways. And it makes sense that more people are having that issue of not being able to breathe, in the same way that it makes a lot of sense that people are having a hard time with being able to sleep. And so I think my real response to that is that we need more and more of our intention and attention going towards breathe, healthy practices. So I feel like we think about that in some ways as far as like moving and eating right and things like that, but like breathing right and sleeping right should be added to that list, because those are two things that are really, I think, necessary for, and it seems like the science is showing necessary for our ability to not only, you know, survive as humans and like, you know, have a healthy body and mind and be able to, you know, live into our old age and all that, but it also affects our ability to imagine the next level of the world. Because it was shown in that exercise with the different types of rest. So some people could rest, some people could non-REM sleep, and some people could experience all of it, including REM sleep. Creativity was incredibly affected by the REM sleep. And so if you're not getting good sleep, you're not experiencing that, and you're not getting that opportunity to process emotion. You're not getting that opportunity to kind of replenish your creativity and your ability to imagine. And as we said, we use imagination to do everything. That's how we created the society we live in. Everything that I can touch or see in my kitchen right now is something that someone created through their imagination before it existed. And so it's a little bit worrisome to know that so many people are having trouble with accessing the thing that allows us to be able to do that imagination work, which I would say I think is maybe not thought of, because people think of imagination and creativity as something that only like artists do, you know what I mean? But it's actually like, it affects both right side and left side of the brain. So.
Okay, so next question, what's next for you? And what's going on like in your practice there in DC?
So one thing that I've been working on is creating more conversation around these subjects. And so I've been, I started having these bi-monthly. We're actually having another one in November. And there is not a flyer for it yet, but as soon as there is, I will share it with you all. Iteration of this series, but they're called Daydream Slumber Parties, and they're basically an exploration of play and rest. And the idea being that opening ourselves up to play is kind of the first part, right? Because especially as adults, we are kind of like so focused on on like work and having our lives together. A lot of times it's very, you know, the joyous times that we have, or the more playful times that we have, are kind of either, you know, not really consistent, or they are almost like in overdrive, because we like have so little time to play, and then finally we can, and we're just like, okay, we can't focus on anything else, and we're like, you know, I don't know, the idea of like going on vacation and like everything's to the wind, and then you come back and it's like, all right, now I have to get back out of my play zone. And it's like, well, can we incorporate play into our everyday lives in a way that makes it so that we have access to that more? And then the idea of the relationship between play and rest is that our ability to play is very similar, very connected to our ability to rest. And so when we are able to open ourselves up to play, I feel like the next step is opening ourselves up to rest for rest's sake. And so that's really what that event is about. And it's more so, it's an event series, but it's really, the purpose is to build community around this. So we are starting like a group chat and some other things, some dialogue that will happen in between events. And then other than that, I think this plays into a lot of when I am working with people one-on-one, doing yoga and meditation training, or even like in the corporate setting, I guess. But I feel like I see it the most when I'm working with people one-on-one, is that people are having a really hard time, like you said, with relaxing, with resting, with getting enough sleep. And so bringing those practices in so that we can create a habit or a ritual of these things. And I think that kind of brings us back to the pause portal, because that was also part of what the pause portal was. It was like making a ritual of rest. Because if it's something that, you know, if you're waking up every morning and doing breath work, and that becomes a habit for you or a ritual for you, that's part of how you start your day, it's going to have more effect than, you know, every once in a while doing, you know, some breath work because we remembered it. So those things that we can anchor into our daily lives help us to improve our ability to do those things when we're not thinking about them. So it's proven that like intentional breathing allows you to breathe better when you're not being intentional about it, when you're not thinking about it, because your body is, it's almost like muscle memory. The same thing is true with rest. The same thing is true with play. Same thing is true with sleep. So I'd say those are the two ways that I'm really using those things to shift the way people think about how they care for themselves. And that's really, a lot of times it's like, sometimes when people think about doing one-on-one sessions with a yoga teacher, they just think you're going to be doing like a yoga class, but specifically for them. But really it's like about assessing like what you're going through in your life and what yoga practices would be helpful to what you're doing. And what I've been finding lately is that everyone's really tired. Everyone's tired and anxious and they just want to like learn how to breathe easy and allow their body to relax. Like a lot of times that can look like movement, because movement does kind of make way for stillness. But a lot of times that looks like what I said, like doing a body scan or doing some breath work.
All right. So anyway, I just put it in the chat so that, you know, these are like, I started going back into vibrational, you know, music and vibe in my space to try to calm, because I'm getting so anxious about everything, So I started calming, you know, and going back in vibrational sound, because I have some art projects or a series that were about vibrational narratives. And I had a recent conversation with an earth keeper that's at the Turtle Lodge up in Canada. And we were talking about ways to, again, breathe and bring ourselves to a still space or a place, you know, through meditation and stuff. So she asked me about vibration, you know, and I was like, what are you talking about? Then I thought, oh yeah, I do vibrational sound narratives in some of my work, especially the jazz series, and then some other the older series. I was doing that. So, you know, I'm bringing that back into, you know, into my studio and into my practice. And so that was just one of the, you know, the musicians that channel. I'm sure that there's other, you know, shamanic music that helps us to channel. But, you know, I'm a visual listener, you know, a person, you know, that needs to do that, because I'm not practicing what I preach, and I'm not practicing like this art of rest and trying to get more in tune with myself.
But one, I want you to not be hard on yourself. I think it's hard to be consistent with any of these practices, which is, you know, why people like me exist, to help us remember to do them regularly. You know, people who are solely working on that. But I do think that sound is an amazing way. I think sound and scent are like the most powerful senses of the five senses, because so easily can they affect our whole like energy field, right? Yeah, vibrational work is something that I feel like not a expert on, so I don't have that much to say. But I know it's been really powerful in my life, and it is a really powerful tool for helping people to find ease and to find that meditative space for themselves. One thing that is also like growing in popularity and I think in necessity is sound healing in general, but people doing sound baths. Like recently, I feel like especially the last like year, it seems like almost anytime someone is asking me to do an event for like a, you know, like a staff retreat or something like that, they're like, we would love for you to do some meditative stuff, but we also really want you to do a sound bath. Like everyone wants a sound bath. And I'm seeing them pop up everywhere, which,
What's a sound bath?
Oh yeah. So a sound bath is an experience where typically you're laying down during the experience, although you can do it sitting up, and a practitioner will have as little as one or as many as, 20 or 30 different sound medicine tools. And that can look like tuning forks, that can look like the big sound bowls that you might see. A lot of times they're made out of crystal, and you'll see someone kind of like rubbing what looks like a mallet, but it's, I don't know, like the stick with felt on it around the edges of it, and it creates this like resounding sound. So sound bowls are like, I think the most popular right now, but also tuning forks, chimes, even the little, like wind chimes, tambourines. Drumming is another example of this. Typically drumming is kind of its own thing outside of these other sound things, but it can be a lot of different things. But the idea is that it's not necessarily like a melody being played, but it's intuitive playing of these different, or not even playing, but activating of these different sound mechanisms that connect with different vibrations and therefore connect with the body. And so it allows you to, gongs are another example of a thing you might see during a sound bath. And these are actually becoming really popular within like especially the yoga world. Like I think there are yoga studios in DC that have sound baths every single Sunday or every single Friday night or something like that. They're becoming like a regular part of that like healing scene or natural holistic healing scene. And it speaks to the importance of sound and our ability to rest. I know people who are like, I could never sit down and meditate in silence, but like a sound bath really helps me to like let go, and so that is a really important tool, and I think one that's becoming used a lot because you're not the only one that is feeling a lot of anxiety, that is feeling some overwhelm by the way that things are. I won't go into details, but you know what I mean? It can be anything from our personal lives to the world at large.
So we'll get it together here. So anything else you want to add to today? I really want to thank you for your presentation. And I know it's not the last of the series. We can continue the series, but again, I want to thank you for your presentation and then what it means for us to document this conversation so that other artists, that we refer over to Pop-Up Research Station can take a look at it. I know we have folks that are on Facebook, that is going live Facebook, and people can really, that are interested in trying to get some control of their lives back, and how we really look at the art of rest and really tune into these kinds of conversations to get our minds wrapped around the fact that we really don't rest. And I've said several times in our meetings that I don't rest. I'm here in a studio and I'm in a major thoroughfare. So it just sounds like I'm standing on the sidewalk all night, with the cars that go by, the trucks that go by, with the wind that goes by. And there's the people, because Chicago is a city that's still alive even at night. Why aren't you asleep, right? So, I am not probably getting REM sleep, but I get sleep, and I wonder why you're so tired. when you wake up in the morning, because there's no sound barriers. And so there's different things that I'm trying to do to encourage myself to rest and not be on all the time. You know what I mean? In this transit world that we're in. I know I've spent a lot of time on the internet, you know, sitting here doing research and development work. So you got the blue screen going, and when I disengage, I have the movies or whatever to channel my mind into what, not being so abstract and thinking about all this stuff, but to focus in on a movie before I go to bed. So that's not really good. You know what I mean? And then again, I have the external sounds of the night, you know, that are continual. They don't stop, you know, and then the horns in the morning. So I don't know, these, you know, exercises and these conversations are welcoming, you know, for me. And I really appreciate you taking the time to join us here at Pop-Up Research Station to, you know, further this conversation. She as well lives on this treadmill of the rapidness of in the work that we do and the engagement of so many different conversations that we continue to have. You know, when you're out here as a consultant and you're multitasking, you know, and I even stopped having my phone on at night, making sure that it's not turned off, but it has a rest time even on the phone, so I don't get these notifications all night from people that are in the Pacific Standard Time and don't understand that it's 2-hour difference or a 3-hour difference when I'm on the East Coast, vice versa. You know, we're right here in Central, Chicago's right here in the center, you know, and I constantly get, you know, interruptions during the night, you know, and that disturbs my sleep as well, you know. So I'm just putting all these different mechanisms around so that I can center myself and get the rest that's needed so that I can face the new day. And then we talked about ageism, you know, and as people are aging, it's saying that we need to get more rest, like 8 hours of sleep a night. Be real, right? I don't get 8 hours of sleep. I may get to sleep by midnight or something, but I don't.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I am kind of planning some workshops for over the winter, and I wonder if the art of rest could be, you know, consolidated in some ways to bring this into a small like workshop, or, you know, a few hours workshop where we're talking about some of these concepts and being able to have these discussions and allow artists to have access to these tools that I think can really contribute to your ability to access that space that you're talking about. It's funny, actually, the name of my business, Liminal Grace, is very similar to the idea of space in the gap, of like this liminal space between breaths, between thoughts, between the future and the past, this like kind of liminal space that we're always right at or right near, that we can kind of access and access and approach with a sense of grace that allows us to, you know, best utilize that space and be the most aware of and alive within that space. And so that I liken that a lot of times for me to healing work, but that can also, I mean, healing work includes the practice of creating. That's a lot of what healing work is creating new narratives for yourself, creating new possibilities. You know, it's a creative, it's an art. And so, yeah, I really appreciate that. And I'm excited to see like kind of how I can pull some of the wisdoms that came out through this series into an experience that we can continue, you know, giving artists access to.